Hey everybody, welcome back to the Parkitect campaign mode. And I just want to start off this video really quickly by thanking everybody for all of the support that you've been giving to the series. It's been amazing, it's been so much better received than I expected actually. I was super afraid of this series just becoming a bit of a niche thing for just a small group of people who are actually playing this game or interested in this game. But the support has actually been really amazing, not just for the videos, but lots of people talking about the campaign, which is really cool to me as well, having been, you know, even if it's just a small part of this game, it's really cool to read all of your comments. Also, I want to try, I've never tried that before, one of those little details where you can click the plane and it'll do like tricks. In any case, yeah, it's just been amazing, so thank you guys. Also, I should probably note, if you're looking at the map right now, it's a little bit different than it usually is, because it's a winter mode. They apparently decided to roll out this sort of seasonal updates, so the maps should change depending on the seasons. But that said, the scenario maps themselves should stay more or less the same. Now about these, in the last episode, I said at the end that the next map would be Victoria Lake, and I guess I'm kind of wrong here, because I didn't realize that it would actually branch off into different paths. So we can also do Western Roundup, but that said, I said I would do Victoria Lake in the last video. And it's also a scenario that I really want to start as well, since it's one of the scenarios which I made. It's actually one of the, if not the first scenario that I made overall. So this is really quite a classic. This one was made over a year ago already, and it's supposed to be one of these sort of generic starting scenarios, but with a little bit of a twist to the landscape. So far, the first scenario, of course, is completely empty, and the second one is still completely flat. So this is where you get some slight terrain differences, and, well, a bit more of a challenge, I suppose, in what kind of terraforming you have. Now, I don't want to talk too much about it before we go into it, but the scenario goal is to have 300 guests in the park, which is a tiny step up from the last goal, which makes sense. And to not have any loan debts, so I'm gonna try my best to also go around that. Now I suggest that we go into it, and I'll tell you a little bit more as we are looking at the map. Alright, so I don't want to keep referring back to Roller Coaster Tycoon at this point, because it's a bit of a moot point I think, but this map was definitely inspired by Leafy Lake in Roller Coaster Tycoon 1. I think some people were suspecting this as well. It's very much based around the lake, and you kind of have to build around it in the way that it's built as well. I added this castle later on because Sebastian asked me to make some buildings in all of the maps which could work as a trophy, as the building that gets put on the map when you're done with the scenario. And I decided a castle over here would work alright, so that's a bit of a more recent addition to the park, but then the rest of this is all pretty old. Now as for the scenario design itself, I already said it's a bit inspired by Leafy Lake in Roller Coaster Tycoon. I liked the idea of having a sort of progression in terms of terrain, keeping the same sort of difficulty of the first scenarios, but adding some more challenge in terms of what kind of land area you get, and having like a big body of water in the middle of the park to work with. But then I thought the original scenario of Leafy Lake is very tight, very crammed. There isn't much space around the lake, and then there's this sort of awkward space at the end of the park as well, where you suddenly get a whole lot of space, but it's kind of at a place where you might not even have gotten to that point when you're done with the scenario. So I thought it'd be a bit more fitting to at least make the park layout a little bit wider around the lake, keep the lake quite small, and make it more of a sort of scenery aspects. Not to mention that theme parks around lakes are a very common trope. You've got parks like Hyde Park and Walibi Belgium, etc. There's lots of different examples. I think it works really well as something to build a theme park layout on. In a general sense, you've got sort of tree-like branching structures when it comes to layouts of theme parks, and then you've got the sort of looping round theme parks, and I think a lake in the center of a theme park works really well as the latter category. In any case, I don't want to dwell on that too much also. I think it's about time that we start heading into the actual building of stuff. I've tried to do some things in this scenario earlier, but because it's a bit generic and there isn't so much to follow a certain theme on, I'm gonna try and just follow a sort of generic European-ish theme on this one. At the very least, make something that could sort of fit into the look of the castle over here. So yeah, let's start a time lapse and we'll see what I can come up with. Alright, now in some scenarios I really sort of have my work cut out for me, and I think this is one of them. Having that main street kind of looking path leading toward the lake and splitting it off into two different paths that move into different parts of the park is a good starting point, I think, for a main street. And also a water ride at the end of it with the swan boats there, so there's something that sort of leads the guests to the lake to check it out and maybe go on the ride. But there's also the part where the paths split up into different directions, and I think right in the middle of that it's a good place to build the information kiosk. What I also wanted to do though is actually turn this into a real main street, and I didn't want to place buildings on both sides of the main street. I thought that'd be a little bit too much and probably also a little bit too expensive. I'm playing a scenario after all, and these things are getting slightly harder every time. So just one side of the main street will be buildings, and for the style I was contemplating what I should do with this for a while, but I think in the end a sort of generic Renaissance-ish European theme should work more or less. I was thinking of medieval for a while, but I don't think that really fits the generic park entrance, so I wanted to have some kind of style which works with that. And to be honest, the castle at the edge of the map is also not so much a real traditional medieval castle, but more of a sort of modern interpretation of it, I would say. But it's always kind of difficult. A medieval theme is really hard to put because the medieval period is so long, and there are honestly so many areas as well where you sort of have a medieval theme. It's very much a Eurocentric theme, I think, and you could really do a lot more with it. But yeah, I wanted to avoid that whole mess, so I'm just going with a sort of overall 18th, 19th century sort of European look. And I do want to mix things up a little bit, so we have the corner building over there, which is the fanciest building of the main street. Which a corner building very often is because it's the most prominent building, you see it quite a lot, and it's a really good opportunity to put a little dome or spire or something fancy on the corner as well. So yeah, that's always nice. But then for this building I wanted to do something a little bit different. So we have the first floor, which is just regular old bricks, and then the sort of timber work second floor there, and a roof which is sort of reminiscent of the red tiled roofs. And honestly, it's not even too strictly any style. It's sort of reminiscent, I suppose, of Tudor buildings in England, but there's also plenty of buildings that look like this in Belgium and in France and Germany. So, you know, having a generic European theme is kind of risky because there's really no such thing as generic European, but with enough of a mixture and buildings that could look like they're from multiple places, I think it should more or less work, because I didn't want to focus on a single country. I think this could be anywhere between France and Germany, anywhere in that sort of area. So yeah, there's that. And the final building, or really the first building if you're coming from the entrance of the park, is just going to sell umbrellas, I believe. I don't know if it's going to be too useful, but I already made a food court out of the corner building. So at least it has some kind of function, and it's going to be pretty simple in terms of what it looks like, but just to be able to sort of fit the look in with the castle a little bit more, I decided to draw the general color scheme from the castle. And this is something that I've probably talked about quite a few times in many of my different videos, but as a general tip when it comes to picking colors for buildings, one strategy that almost always works is to pick 3 colors for a building. 1 color for the roof, 1 for the walls, and 1 for the details or accents. And mostly that works. You have some exceptions, like the brick building with the red roof having sort of different styles for different floors, and this building being much more generic, really having a color scheme of 2 colors in general. But it's something to keep in mind. Having 4 or 5 different, completely different colors for a single building almost never really works out. Even if you're going for a super colorful theme, just picking a certain set of 3 colors per building, maybe even 2 colors per building, should always work out fine. So on the corner building, for instance, there's a sort of beige color of all of the walls and things that are attached to the walls, and then there's the dark grayish color for the roof and some of the details there, and there's a bit of red accents in the awnings. So a general strategy like that could work quite well, I think. You could also have the awnings be the same color as the roof color, for instance, and go with completely different colors for the pillars. There's a bunch of ways in which you can have a sort of variation in that, but picking a sort of 3-color scheme for a building before moving into it, I think is always a pretty easy and sound strategy to make sure that your colors are on point. Anyway, I gotta hurry up because I'm already building a coaster over here. And somebody corrected me last episode on what kind of coaster this is, so I should probably talk about that a little bit. I called this the Vekoma Junior Coaster or roller skater in the last episode, but it's not really that, because this has diagonal cross ties, which the Vekoma roller skater doesn't, so I should correct myself there. And, well, in the comments, the person said that it's probably a Zero Tivoli coaster, which I think is correct when it comes to the trains, because they have these articulated sort of junior coaster trains. But then the actual track has tubular rails, so I think it's a bit of a mixture of different real-life family coasters. It's probably the trains of a Zero Tivoli coaster, and then the rails of a Zero ESC coaster, I believe. But in any case, it's definitely not a Vekoma roller skater. So for the layout, I thought it'd be interesting to have 3 helixes, each one in a different direction, which is the holy grail of family coasters. And then a second part where it sort of moves over the lake and has some interaction with the paths as well as the water ride down there. And overall, I'm actually really happy with this layout. It came out a lot better than I expected. It's very loosely based on the coaster that I built in the same place when I was sort of testing this scenario when I was still working on it. But it's actually a lot better than the earlier version, so that's good. And it also makes pretty good use, I think, of the new option of the coaster creator to transition into different curves and different, well, banks, I suppose. And also the option that you have at the end to connect your track to the very first track. Because that used to be a big problem, where connecting back to the station if you're on a slightly different height used to be really difficult in Parkitect, but now the game just sort of does that automatically. So that was super useful as well, because I wouldn't be able to build this layout as nicely without that. And as for the scenery, it's all just pretty simple. I don't want to theme anything too much yet here. It's kind of a similar case to Maple Meadows. It's a bit of a small family-ish park. Even though it might have some scenery, we have a bit of a main street going here. It's not quite on Disney level, so I think a generic sort of mostly unthemed except for the queue and station approach to the coaster, I think works out more or less in this case. And then there's the little square. I wanted to put that roof over there just to make this area feel a little bit more like a square. I did like the idea of having it as a sort of look out over the lake, but I wanted to have something to sort of end the main street, some kind of mass which sort of signifies and turns this area with the information kiosk into a small square. So I think that mostly works for that. And over here I had some space left, and I decided to just build a small pavilion to preserve the idea of a main street here, and maybe have a nice place for people to, I don't know, stand and watch the coaster go around, something like that. And over here I decided to put an area where people can sit and eat, because there's the food court nearby, but there's not really a place inside the food court to eat. It's really just stalls, it's really small. So this is going to be the area where if people are getting a lot of food and want to sit somewhere, they should probably do it in here. It's also a nice place to get some benches and put some parasols everywhere, which always looks quite fancy, so I really like that. And I also almost forgot to build a toilet, so here goes. Here's the toilet, so people can actually go there as well. I always forgot to place these things when I was playing Planet Coaster, but in this case we really need these things from a gameplay perspective, so I'm not forgetting about these things anytime soon. I do want to keep hiding them in small buildings though, and this building also doubles as a way to hide the depot which is behind it, so that the scenery rating doesn't tank too much, because the paths over here are pretty close to the depot. And finally, and you might have seen the colors of the seating area change a little bit here. My computer actually blue screened for a second there, so I had to rebuild that, and I took the opportunity to slightly mess a little bit with the colors, make them a bit darker and more vibrant. But in any case, I decided to build a carousel over here, not really because I thought it'd be the best flat ride, but if you look at my money over there, there's not much of it left, so that was just about all that I could do, and also theme it to a decent extent. So yeah, that's basically it. And at this point, I need to get back into the game and see if I can somehow financially save this park, because it's in a bit of a rut right now. Alright, I hope I wasn't going too fast there, because I had a lot to talk about during that time lapse. But here's the park, and we're doing pretty shabby. We're losing $137 per month at the moment, so that's not very good. But I hope, sincerely, that I can make some money out of the coaster which I have right now, because I know for sure that the water ride and the carousel and the slide aren't going to make too much money. Although, as for the carousel, for some reason it seems to be pretty popular so far. Is the price on this good? I could probably ask much more for that. I'm gonna ask these people $3 for a carousel, which is absolutely ridiculous, but we'll see if they want to pay. And, oh, what are you thinking? A bit more intense. Alright, I've had enough of this park. Oh god. Alright. Well, I'm sorry about that. I haven't seen any Vandals yet, so I'm a bit afraid that I won't be able to show that anytime soon. But Vandals in Parkitect are really funny, because they get like this bandana or something. They start looking like Vandals basically, and then they break stuff, and then they get out of your park. And it's always fun to spot them and drop them into a lake or something. In any case, I hope we're doing fine. The coaster is running an empty train, that's not very good. Because it's broken. Alright. I think I'm gonna have to run the park for a little bit longer to see if we're actually doing fine when it comes to money. So I'll see if I can somehow turn this around and run a profit. And otherwise, I am gonna go for the very sustainable, but probably not so much strategy of just getting big loans and building more rides, and hopefully we'll be able to solve our money issues that way. But yeah. It's not that the scenario isn't easy, this is definitely a really easy scenario. I just went way too much into the scenery part of things, and turns out that this whole main street and all of the scenery around it was pretty expensive, so we'll see if we can somehow turn that around. Aha! And there you go, now we're making profits, so that's pretty good. That's actually happening much sooner than I expected, so I won't be failing this scenario at the very least. Now, in the last episode, I also got some questions whether I wanted to do some POVs of the coasters, because this was actually very much requested. People really liked to have on-ride videos, but I have to say it's not a part of Parkitect Vanilla. There is a mod which allows you to go on-ride when it comes to your coasters, but personally, I like to keep the game in isometric mode, since I think that's where the appeal of it is. That's where the sort of nostalgic look to the game comes from, but also I think that's what helps the game be very management focused and allows you to stay focused on management even if you're looking into design and creativity as well. Because as soon as you go completely 3D, it very much becomes a sort of immersive experience, and I think by keeping it isometric you still get that sort of aerial perspective which changes things a little bit. I think it keeps you out of the park itself and keeps you as a sort of benevolent or maybe malevolent creator. So I'm gonna stay in this sort of perspective, but what you can do is aim the camera at the car, and I'm gonna actually have to fix some of the timing on these block bricks because they always have to wait on top of the lift hill, which is a little bit annoying. But yeah, you can basically have the camera follow the train, but that's about all that you can do. So it's not too special, but you can watch it go around, which is pretty nice. I should also say I had some requests to turn some of my coaster layouts and maybe even my buildings into blueprints, and I'll definitely think about that. I'm not sure if I'll be linking them down in the description for all of the videos, but for some of the stuff which I think is blueprint worthy, I'll try to upload it. And this coaster, for instance, I think is good enough to turn into a blueprint. So yeah, if you check my Steam workshop, I basically have the exact same name on Steam as my YouTube name. You can hopefully find some of the stuff from my scenarios in there. So there's that, and that was the coaster, and I think overall it's pretty good. It's not really a good time to check the graphs, but it's a good time to check the test results. And I think overall the excitement is pretty good, but the intensity is still very low. So in the end, I'm gonna need some more intense rides, I think, because I really don't have anything intense yet. Speaking of which, I don't think I need to research anything. I just need to earn more money to be able to afford especially this one, because this is gonna be really intense. So that's a bit of a goal. I think I can do fine with the wooden coaster for now. I don't think I have to really research many more coasters or anything like this. All that I really need to think about is where I want to place that thing, and I am considering placing it along the lake here and making it into sort of a skyline type attraction. But yeah, I'll have to think about that a little bit more. It sort of comes back to the park layout that I talked about earlier. I feel like if I put a wooden coaster over there, it almost kind of feels like Canobie Lake Park, which has Boulder Dash in it, as well as I believe a few other woodies which aren't as good. But anyway, a sort of classic, sort of traditional feeling theme park with a lot of wooden coasters and other classic theme park rides. I think that's a general good theme for this scenario, so that's something I'll go for. And alright, I think that's pretty much it. It's a good time to probably still get some loans, because I don't want to wait until I earn more money, so I'm just gonna get a loan and expand into probably this part of the park. I should also say I put some signs over here. There's one over here as well, and one over here, to make sure that the guests don't walk around the entire lake, and I highly suggest you do the same when you get these scenarios with a lot of paths or back areas of the park. Because scenarios will, because guests will go to these parts of the scenarios and they won't be able to do anything there, and they'll just be getting disappointed and sad and not spending any money on your rides. So yeah, always try to put some signs on the dead end areas of your park when you're not yet building anything there. Now with that said, let's get into another time lapse and build some more flat rides. Alright, now my plan to build more flat rides didn't end up working very well, and I'll give you a bit of a spoiler. I almost went into bankruptcy and I had to go back to an older save to fix the park. So here's the issue. I don't have anything to make some of my thrill-demanding guests happy, I suppose. So in a lot of cases, if your park doesn't make the guests happy or doesn't make a certain subset of the guests happy, they'll turn into vandals and they'll start destroying everything. And this problem can go bad really quickly, and I think this playthrough is a good example of it. So you can see right now I'm trying to use the mechanics and janitors to clean up everything all the time. But honestly, the vandals destroy stuff quicker than I can clean it up, and a lot of this process costs money as well. Like, even if a mechanic repairs a bench, it takes some of your money. So we get these vandals, these guys with the bandanas over here, and I'll get back into that during the real-time section as well. But basically, I couldn't really stop them, and I had an imminent bankruptcy there, so I decided to go back and get a really big loan and try to prevent all of this from happening by building more thrill rides. So I put the same thrill ride near the water there, but clearly that thing wasn't enough. So I'm adding this pirate ship as well. I'm not doing too much scenery quite yet. I really just want to try and put some quick rides with easy money in, just to fix the park and hopefully make people less angry and try to actually run a profit as well, because as you can see, the minimal profit that I was running was quickly destroyed by the fact that people were unhappy and turning into vandals all over the place. So a few thrill rides and a roller coaster to fix that issue is basically what I was thinking of. That said, I didn't want to plop them down in a sense to remove them later or just, you know, as a gameplay focus, so I also wanted to have them, well, at least look somewhat nice and be able to maybe pick it up later during the play and improve the general look of the flat rides. So I do want to keep these things around, and I do want to theme them a little bit later. This is just a very basic sort of way to fix the issue that we have right now, and I think some of these rides, which all have at least a medium intensity rating, should fix the issue more or less. But it's quite difficult, especially since you don't start off with a lot of very thrilling rides right at the start. Now over here, this wooden coaster, I built this thing purely to try and fix the park a little bit more, try and get something a bit more intense and something that attracts more guests. So this thing is gonna be temporary. I was planning to put a wooden coaster here in the end, But this super simple sort of out and back layout is something that I decided to just keep in the park for as long as I needed, but as soon as I make enough money and the guests are happy, I want to change it anyway. Now the first iteration of this wasn't quite intense enough, so I decided to make a slightly different version from it, with some airtime hills that are way too tight, but should hopefully make some good airtime to give us a good intensity rating. Same goes for the positive G's at the bottom, and I removed the brakes for the curve so that we can have some extra lateral G's in that curve as well. And yeah, get a generally medium intensity wooden coaster for not that much money. And then over here is a little bit of scenery when it comes to the flat ride over here. But during the process of that, something happened. Okay, so that's a little bit awkward. I really just wanted to save the park and get my finances in order, and I wasn't anywhere near finishing what I wanted to finish. But now I already reached the goal of the scenario, it seems. So that's one goal that we've reached. So that's 300 guests in the park. But then the other goal is to have no loan debts. So I'm still fine, and oh god, those vandals are still doing their thing. But maybe it's a good idea anyway to take a small real-time section to show everything a little bit more. So I've been continuously checking for the decoration and vandalism tabs what's going on in the park. I had enormous problems with vandals before I had any of the more intense rides, but now it seems that most of those problems have been fixed. So I have a little bit of vandalism, like this stuff over here, but it's not anywhere near as bad as it used to be. So really, having no thrill rides in your park and operating on just gentle rides absolutely kills your park. And that was definitely the biggest issue that I had before. Now, the temporary wooden coaster is something that I would still like to turn into a real thing. So I think it might be a good idea to just wait with repaying the loan until I have the kind of park that I want to have. And then once everything is up and running and it looks good, I can finish the repayment of the loan, and that'll be the end of the scenario. So in a way, having that sort of extra level of difficulty by having to repay the loan kind of makes sense. It works out in this case, so I'm pretty happy with that. I'm not entirely sure how this works. Right, so I can basically repay 1,000 of my loan right now. Okay, yes, yeah, that takes away 1,000. So it's not going to automatically repay the loan. So I think it's good to drop that 1,000, but for now, I think I'm going to try and keep this park running and just keep a bit of loan in there until I'm done with the park as I want it to be. Then keep the finances in order and we should be able to make it. Alright, so let's get back into the time lapse. But before I do that, actually, I'd like to look at a vandal over here. So here's one guy with a bandana. Actually, it's like a mask for your mouth. I don't know exactly what to call those things. Anyway, so here's a guy that is pretty much looking like a vandal over here. Then he's taking some well-needed rest, I suppose, after destroying half my park. But yeah, let's just repair some of the stuff that he's broken. I think this guy alone is going to destroy a lot of the park if I just let him keep going. Yeah, there he goes. Just destroys the lamp that I just repaired. So normally what you do with these guys, I mean, you can drop them into a lake if you so desire, but you can just ban them out of the park, then they'll get mad, and then they'll leave. And I've checked this on a couple of guys, but it seems that on their way to the entrance, they don't really destroy anything else, so banning them pretty much saves you all of the problems that these guys normally cause. But yeah, they are quite a problem. So vandalism was really the major issue, and still is. I mean, if you keep going around here, here's some broken lamps and some broken trash cans, and I'm not seeing any other vandals at the moment, but it's definitely a big issue in the park. So that's something that I hope got fixed by the extra thrill rides, but we'll have to see. I also hired a security guy and an extra mechanic, and hopefully that should solve the issue at least partly as well. But as you can see, they are still going around breaking stuff, and wow, god, that's terrible. Hold up, let me replace some of that. I don't see anybody walking around causing anything, but just one or two vandals. Oh, there is a guy. There he is. let's ban that guy already. So yeah, I don't know what he's thinking. Oh, he's also banned. Ah, that's pretty good. I don't remember banning that guy, but sure, alright. Sometimes you get these ridiculous vandals like I just had as well, who complains about the vandalism in the park, which is a bit strange as well. It's a bit of an asshole move, but sure, whatever they're into. But yeah, this is definitely one of the biggest challenges that I've had in the game so far. And I don't know if it's just because of the lack of thrill rides, or if there's other factors like a lack of toilets or anything like that in there as well. Oh, there it is. It is a banana. Okay, fair enough. Alright. But yeah, it doesn't seem like there's anything particularly causing it. His happiness is actually quite high for somebody who's destroying everything. Although I guess maybe Patty is a girl name. I don't know. In any case, it's getting out of the park right now, so that's one vandal less. But it's still a big problem. Like, I can go here and there's another destroyed lamp, and here's another destroyed lamp, and another destroyed bench, and another vandal. So I'll spend some time thinking about this, then I'll get back to building. Anyway, let's go back into the time-lapse. Alright, so for this time-lapse I can take things a little bit more slowly because I'm really just finishing up the park to whatever point that I feel it's done, and I want to move on to the next scenario. And I went into the idea of how to fix vandalism for a little bit, and I found a Reddit thread where people also found a very similar sort of, not really an issue, but challenge I suppose, because it's part of the game. I basically had this wave of vandals come over into my park, and there's not much you can do about that apparently. Apparently they just come into the park looking for a riot and looking to destroy things, and at that point your only real defense against it is either drowning them yourself or just having enough security to take care of that in some way. And I should also say that when I saw the Vandal earlier, which was already banned, apparently that's what security does, which I didn't even notice. I thought it would be just that wherever security is, Vandals don't do their vandalizing activities, but if they're caught by security, they get banned from the park and leave. So that's pretty interesting actually. So apparently if you have a wave of these Vandals, the best advice is to just have enough security and have them walk around as much as possible to try and minimize the damage. But you can always also go for the strategy of just having a lot of people just repair and maintain all of the paths, and, you know, even though stuff gets broken, you'll always have the guys repair it as well. So that's that. Now on this side of the park, I decided to not completely finish the loop around the lake, because I want to save some space for the wooden coaster, and I think to completely build an entire park around the entire lake would be a little bit too much maybe. I think it'd be fair to stop just at this Ferris wheel and with finishing the wooden coaster and just leave it at that. Obviously I could build a lot more into the park and it would feel much more finished, but at some point I do want to finish the scenario and move to the next thing. I think there's maybe some things you can pick up on this when I upload it into the workshop, and maybe finish it yourself. I also have to keep in mind that while these scenarios might be quite easy and I can focus on scenery quite a lot, even though I do get these gameplay challenges every now and then like the Vandal problem, it's gonna be a little bit harder for some of the later parks in the campaign mode to actually theme them to this extent. So I don't want to go all out over here yet, because I'm gonna have to face a bit more challenging parks later on. So I do want to have a comparatively similar level of theming when it comes to that. So yeah, that's that. I just wanted to finish this area with a few extra flat rides, one toilet building over here. Actually, that's not a toilet building, that's the one that I just built. This is the vending machine building, because I didn't want to build a whole depot and do all of that infrastructure, but for people who did want a snack or a drink or something, I think a vending machine should more or less work. And then there's the Ferris wheel over there and the drop tower, which is not too big. You can always raise it a little bit, but I thought a slightly smaller drop tower like that should work fine in any case. I also like these things a lot in real life. They're some of my favorite drop towers, but I shouldn't dwell on that too much because I'm actually gonna build the wooden coaster over here. And this was quite a bit of an experiment, I suppose. For the first time in this game, I tried building a GCI wooden coaster. And for those of you who don't know, GCI, or Great Coasters International, is a wooden coaster manufacturer with a very distinct type of track layouts and feel to the coasters. And they also have these typical trains. You see the articulated trains right there with 2 people per car, and then there's just a very long row of cars per train. That's how these things typically look, and they're known for that, but they're also known for their snappy transitions and how smooth, yet still very, not entirely rough, but their coasters kind of shake you around in a good way. And it's that sort of layout which I try to recreate in Parkitect here, and it's something that I never really dared to do so far. But the new feature that allows you to connect 2 ends of the track when there are no pieces in the piece-by-piece track creator that can actually connect the 2 parts just makes so many more possibilities in terms of what kind of transitions you build between curves. So for an example, over here, I decided to build that little hill over there and then remove it and turn what used to be 2 pieces into 1 piece by having the auto connect the 2 pieces. And by doing this, you can have a single piece that goes from banked to unbanked while going up and down at the same time, and some other stuff like that. You can basically create much smoother but also different transitions than before. So even though I think this was added into the game just to make connecting to the station a little bit easier, it really opens up a lot of possibilities when it comes to making coasters in the game in general. You can create all these different transitions as long as you are on a piece where there's a straight piece of track and the difference in height between the 2 pieces that you're trying to connect isn't too much. But even then, it's something which makes making coasters like GCI wooden coasters a lot easier. So yeah, another thing I should probably note about this, these coasters tend to have these typical drops where it curves down during the drop, so that's why the first drop is like that. And they also have a lot of interesting sort of ways in which the hills are shaped. And I've been explained this by somebody who works in the company which has been created by some of the former bosses of GCI. It's a bit too complicated for me to explain in one video. If you're watching this, Dustin, thanks. But basically their layouts are calculated in a very unique way, which results in these layouts with curves that have their little hills and stuff inside the curves. So over here you can see I'm moving into a curve and then I'm keeping the bank and going from straight to a slope down and then curving again, which is something that normally you don't really see. You'd normally just kind of smoothly follow the curves, but these coasters often have these very sudden transitions where it just goes straight for a little bit or something like that. And I think it's this what makes them so interesting. It gives you these tiny little pops of airtime throughout the ride, which is really cool. And I might not be the best at making a layout of this kind of coaster, or hell, Parkitect might not even be the best game to try this sort of thing in, but I decided to just do it in this case. And if you didn't exactly understand me, I can totally understand that, because my explanation wasn't all too good. Just take it as in these coasters are really unique, and I tried my best to sort of emulate their kind of layouts in Parkitect, because we have this new way of making layouts. Now the station is actually another typical GCI feature, I think. A lot of these wooden coasters, you can recognize them by the fact that they have a part of the track which flies through the station, which is really interesting. It usually goes above the station, so when you're standing there and you're waiting for the train that you can board, you'll always have another train just kind of crash through the station. It's the most loud thing ever, and it's a bit annoying maybe sometimes, but it's really cool at the same time. So I wanted to feature that as well. So we have the coaster track 1 floor above the station going through the station building. And then the station building itself is pretty compact as well. There's some stairs and stuff for the entrance and the exit in the middle of it. So it was a bit of a puzzle to figure out how to actually put all of this stuff underneath one roof. But I think in the end it more or less works out. It's not too complicated. It looks a lot more complicated than it is. but it works out as a pretty GCI-ish station, I think. So there's that. I also decided to put some extra supports under some parts of the track because some supports disappeared, and realistically in wooden coasters you then get some metal beams that sort of connect the different parts of the wooden coaster that are under supported, and a very simple queue with a little roof over there, and finally I'm adding some of the foliage to make sure that it all just blends into the park quite nicely. So that's more or less it. Aside from this, I'm not really adding anything substantial into the park. So you can see that there's a big empty space between this wooden coaster and where the Ferris wheel is, which isn't really connected in any way, but I just want to keep it this way. And I think after all, in the end, the park turned out quite nice. I'm pretty happy with how it turned out, and I'm actually really happy with the GCI coaster. It's not the perfect layout, but I think there's definitely potential in making these kinds of wooden coasters in Parkitect. In any case, let's move into a quick real-time section for a final overview. Okay, so here's our wooden coaster happily doing its rounds. I do have to add, I changed the ending bit a little bit because, as I said, they have these interesting transitions of going up and down during the curves, which makes it feel as if you have these straight sections during the curves, but if you look from above, they're actually completely curved. So my reference for this coaster was mostly Troy in Toverland, and this is something I noticed looking at that coaster. And the final helix that I had before was looking super square because of the different transitions. So I think this one, even though it's a little bit less of what I was trying to go for, works out a little bit more. So yeah, that's also why the coaster is in test mode, despite the fact that I can pretty much open it at this point. And for an example of these new transitions going from straight to a banked sort of position while also going up and down, if we look over here, this entire track piece is one piece. So you can see that the track, and it'll pass by here in a second, so you can see that it is pretty smooth. It starts going up over here and starts slightly banking, and during that it also starts to go straight again at the end of the piece to smoothly transition into that curve. And before this, I would have made, I would have had to turn this into two different pieces. So one piece where it goes up and then one piece where it starts banking and goes to straight, or something like that. It would have been a lot less smooth and a lot less nice to look at. I think especially the transition over here at the end is super nice, where it kind of curves down and at the same time it goes to like the banking goes straight, so it's super cool. So I actually really like this addition to the coaster builder. Overall, I'm pretty happy with the layout. It's not too much to see. Again, I can't really do an on-ride of it, but I am quite happy with it. So yeah, let's just open it. And as for the park itself, I'm also quite glad with how this came out. Definitely, well, really prefer the entrance area out of any other part of the park. But then again, I think that makes sense. It's definitely the most important part of the park. I should also address, and I've had some comments about this on my previous videos, you can see some lag in my videos, and I have to say, in part, this is Fraps, because even though it's or rather it's OBS, because I still haven't figured out how to perfectly get it to smoothly run while also running the game at the same time. I think my CPU is not too happy with it, but partly it's definitely also the game itself, since these parks do end up getting a lot of scenery and a lot more scenery pieces, I think, than most people will use on their playthroughs. So that's definitely a factor as well. But overall, I've noticed that there's more lag in the videos than I'm really seeing myself. Like, there's not too much bothering me right now, so that's something I have to look into. But if you're watching the first video of Maple Meadows, for instance, and wondering about the lag at the end, it should be fine if you get the game. So yeah, there's that. And then there's this little area over here, which even though it's small, I actually quite like as well. It still has a pretty charming feel to it, I think. It's also interesting how this sort of unintentionally turned into the thrill rides corner of the park, where some of the more intense rides are. Over here there's really just a Gravitron, but most of the things on this side is kind of, you know, the family oriented rides. So yeah, that's pretty much it for this park. I don't think I can nicely fit the whole thing in one view. Maybe, yeah, something like this. That's just about good enough, I think. So Right now, I think it's time to pay off my loan, because even though I wasn't for quite a while after I finished the coaster, I can now pretty much repay the whole thing. And then, if my memory serves me right, I should be able to finish the scenario right away. That's not the message that I was waiting for. Hold on. So, I've completed all goals. Nice! So there we go, there's the confetti. I wasn't able to show you guys earlier, but this is what happens when you finish a scenario. So let's save that under the second Victoria Lake, the one that didn't completely crash and burn. And let's take a look at the main map, because something that I didn't know before either, but I had to read into, is the fact that you apparently get coins for completing the goals of scenarios, and you get extra coins for completing the optional goals. And you need these coins to unlock new scenarios, so it's not a super linear thing. Not only do you get like multiple branches of scenario paths that you can go down, but you also get more scenarios depending on how many of the optional goals you complete. Although I should also note, you don't need to complete any of the optional goals. You will be able to play every scenario if you don't complete any of the optional goals. So there's that. But in my case, I'm actually kind of curious how well I did on this scenario. I don't think I got all of the... Yeah, there you go. Mostly the final challenge goal is completing by the end of September year 2. Well, I'm in year 6, which is pretty bad, I guess. Anyway, let's check the main menu and see what we've got. Alright, we finished Victoria Lake. There it is, the trophy. Ah, the castle that I built earlier. It's super cool to see it in here like this. Oh, and that fits really nicely on the map as well. So the next scenario is gonna be... Oh yeah, it's gonna be Coral Caldera. Caldera, there we go. But I still need more coins for that apparently. So the next one is actually going to be Western Roundup. So that's interesting. This is one that I didn't make myself. This is one that Joshua made. And then this is a scenario which I made, but I can't really get to, which is also why I know the name of the scenario. Sometimes it can be a little bit confusing because you have these names for sort of the areas on the map, but these are just sort of, you know, park plains being this general area of the map. So these aren't actually the scenario names. So the scenario in here is Coral Caldera, but we'll get to that some other day. In the next episode, we'll look at Western Roundup. So yeah, thanks for watching guys, and I'll see you all next time.